When the flowers open up completely, that's when we know we're getting production below the surface. Guten Yardening, everybody! Today I'm going to get you up close and personal with the potato. This past growing season, we harvested almost 200 pounds of potatoes. That's 90 kilograms. And we don't have a root cellar, so some of the potatoes are starting to sprout. Now, before I go any further into this video and describing and explaining to you what we're doing with these potatoes, I have a trivia question for you. And I'm going to provide the answer later on in the video, but I want to see how close you can get to the correct answer. In 2011, the Guinness Book of World Records recorded what they say is the heaviest potato ever grown. How much do you think it weighed? Leave your answer as a comment down below, and we'll let you know later on in the video. As a result of those sprouting potatoes, we made the decision to plant some in our indoor grow tent, both in our raised bed and in some of our containers. As a result of that planting, we now have the opportunity to share with you a little bit of information about the life cycle of a potato, and hopefully tell you some things that you probably didn't know about this amazing plant. One thing you might not know about potatoes is that, like tomatoes, there are determinate varieties and indeterminate varieties. Now with tomatoes, the indeterminate variety will grow and grow and grow up and taller, versus the determinate variety, which is more like a bush. It'll stop at some point, it won't get any larger. Well, with determinate potatoes, what you'll find is that they mature faster, usually 70 to 90 days. And once you plant this, the stem right above the seed potato is where you'll see the roots and then the tubers develop. And so for a determinate variety, the finished potato size is often a little bit smaller, but if you're someone who doesn't have a lot of space or a lot of depth to your soil, the determinate variety might be the way to go. Something like these fingerling potatoes or Yukon Gold potatoes. You can't expect as big a harvest as, say, an indeterminate variety. And these are two indeterminate varieties. This is the German butterball potato, and this is the red Pontiac potato. Both of these are indeterminate potatoes, which means when I plant them in the ground, they're going to send out roots, and anywhere along the stem that you cover with soil, with mulch, etc., anywhere it comes in contact with that soil, you have the potential for potatoes to develop. So these get planted deeper than our determinate varieties. They get planted deeper. After they grow about 5 to 7 inches tall, that's when you start adding mulch. And as they grow taller, you continue to add mulch or soil, and you continue to see the opportunity for more crops to develop. These tend to take longer to come to maturity, maybe 90 to 120 days. But the end result here should be bigger potatoes and more potatoes. So this is something that you would worry about mounding. You want to mound your soil versus our determinate variety, which doesn't need any mounding at all. Again, it's going to just be slightly above where the seed potato is planted. Now you can see these potatoes are at various stages of sprouting. Some of them don't have any sprouts on them at all, like this purple fingerling potato. But I'm showing you these because I see a question asked very often, and I want to make it clear that the answer to the question, can you plant potatoes that you buy from the store, is yes. If you buy organic potatoes from the store, potatoes that haven't been sprayed with any kind of inhibitor at all, you can definitely plant them. And that's how we planted these fingerling potatoes that we harvested a few months ago. These fingerling potatoes were from a 1 pound bag of organic potatoes that turned into an 8-pound harvest. If we were to purchase potatoes that were not organic, they might have been sprayed with an inhibitor. In that case, we wouldn't see this kind of development when the sprouting begins. These potatoes were grown from organic seed potatoes that we purchased at a local organic greenhouse. These Yukon Gold potatoes were grown from organic potatoes we bought at the store. They're not all purchased as seed potatoes. We have had plenty of success growing potatoes from the store that we purchased that were organic. Now I'm going to look very closely at this purple potato because, as you can see, because of the color, the eyes of the potato are very visible. And this is where all of our development starts whenever we're trying to grow something from one of these potatoes. The first thing that happens as these start to turn into our seed potatoes is that the eyes begin to develop these buds. And I'm sure you've seen this on potatoes that have been left too long in your pantry or wherever you've been storing them. The eyes of the potatoes begin to form these buds, and if these buds are left just a little bit longer, they begin to form these sprouts. And boy, do the sprouts grow quickly once they're started. And you'll notice, of course, these have not been placed in soil, and so you can get a lot of sprout growth prior to placing these in soil. And this is one way to save time if you're trying to plant in the summer, to get these to sprout like this prior to planting, prior to trying to put them in the soil. Because if they sprout this much, you've already got a lot of growth happening here, and if you plant something like this, you're going to have no problem getting the plant to start. Now, you don't need to wait for the growth to get this long, for the sprout to get this long. If you see even a 1/2 inch to 3/4 inches of growth from the buds here or these sprouts, it's time to put it in the ground. So something like this is going to grow really quickly once I place it into the soil. As a part of our experimentation, we have a couple of 3-gallon grow bags in here, and you can actually see 2 different stages of potatoes. These were planted about a week apart, and you can see the difference in growth. And I'm going to show you some of the other potatoes here in just a second, so you can see that range in speed of growth. Because these are different varieties, we have some Pontiac Red and we have some German Butterball in here. And the mix we planted these in is a soilless mix. So we have some Cocoa Cure, some potting mix, some organic potting mix, some perlite, a little bit of vermiculite in here as well. So we have good water retention in here as well as good drainage, so that's excellent. And we added some general fertilizer and some bone meal. And we dug down about 4 inches. You can see that this container itself isn't all that tall. If I hold my hand up to it, it's about 8 inches of soil in here right now, 7-8 inches of soil. And so we dug down about 4 inches when we planted these. And you can see the growth over time. This is about 3 weeks worth of growth here. Once they get started, once they bust through the surface and start shooting up here, they grow very quickly. So right here we have, I would say, about 8 to 10 inches of growth. And next door, the plant that's been in here for about a week longer, we have almost a foot of growth here. And you can see the coloration of these leaves is a beautiful, deep green leaf. What we don't see on this plant yet are the flowers, like on this plant, which has been in for just over a month, when they start to develop up here and start to bloom. When the flowers open up completely, that's when we know we're getting production below the surface. That's when those tubers are really starting to develop down below. Now this plant is almost 2 feet tall. We have to be really careful with it not to disturb it, but 2 feet. And again, look at these beautiful deep leaves here in our grow tent. So clearly we have a happy potato plant that is starting to produce some nice potatoes. The answer to the question I asked earlier about the heaviest potato, well, it would put these to shame. According to the Guinness Book of World Records, the heaviest potato ever grown weighed 10 pounds and 14 ounces. That's 4.98 kilograms. And it was grown in the United Kingdom. You can see some more of our potatoes growing in our raised bed. We've planted somewhere in the neighborhood of 8 to 12 potatoes so far, and that's not a spectacular amount. And so realistically, are we going to get a massive harvest out of here? And that's an interesting question. First of all, this is the first time that we've tried to grow these potatoes in here, and so we don't really know what to expect fully. But there are probably going to be 2 potential outcomes for these plants. We may end up getting a harvest out of here that we want to eat. That's highly possible. I mean, these do look super nice, and I imagine that what's happening underneath, because this soilless mixture is clearly making these plants happy, we may end up with some nice sized potatoes. But the real reason we're planting this is because we don't want any of these potatoes that are already sprouting to go to waste. And so what we are doing right now by planting these is creating the possibility of more seed potatoes. More seed potatoes that we can plant when we plant outside. We're hopeful that we don't have to buy seed potatoes this year and that we can plant enough that our harvest exceeds the 200 pounds that we grew this year. Now here's a little pro tip. If you planted this, if you made this an indoor plant for you, you could, for about 2 to 3 months, have a really quick growing, really nice looking plant. I mean, you can see how beautiful the foliage is on here. And when these flowers open up, it is absolutely stunning. So for a period of time, you could have a really quick growing, beautifully green, flower-filled plant that you could enjoy in your home. Now, after the plant has flowered for some time, you'll see that this green goes away and turns yellow. The plant dies back, and once it's died back fully, that's when we know everything is finished cooking underneath. But for that period of time, for that couple of months, that'd be an amazing experience. Your family would probably enjoy it, and you could enjoy the harvest at the end of that growing season, unlike most other indoor plants. So far, the experiment with growing these potatoes under various lighting conditions is going quite well. We have a foot of growth here, we have 2 feet on one of our other plants, and we have flowers growing already. But the next 2 months are going to determine what our harvest looks like. One thing's for sure, we're going to do our best not to let anything go to waste and to allow last season's harvest to work toward next season's harvest. We hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, give us a like, leave us a comment, don't forget to share and subscribe, and most importantly, remember, when you're with us, you are good to grow.